Thank God I never married you.
But you're the one I want to spend my life with. Please, this is when I need you the most. Julian, please, she's your daughter. I need you right now.
You should have thought about that before you lost everything.
Julian, we're going to be late.
Thank God I found a woman who knows how to carry herself with dignity. Tamuno said it loud enough for Wumi to hear every word, as his hand already laced through Similowa's fingers as they came down the front steps of the Ekondayo mansion. Wumi sat frozen in the wheelchair, baby Ivy asleep against her chest, a blanket covering legs that, as far as everyone watching was concerned, would never carry her again. Behind her, Uju's knuckles had gone pale from how hard she was gripping the handles. Tamuno, please. Wumi's voice cracked down the middle. She's your daughter. I need you right now, more than I have ever needed anyone. He didn't stop walking. You should have thought about that before you lost everything. Similowa laughed, a short, ugly sound, and rested her head on his shoulder as the driver held the car door open for them both. The gate man at the Ekondayo estate would later tell his wife that he had never seen Ikoyi go so quiet so quickly. The drivers, the caterers packing up their trays, even the security detail at the gate, all of them pretending not to watch while watching closely all the same. Somewhere behind Wumi, a photographer hired for the gala lowered his camera slightly, unsure whether this too was part of the evening's program. Wumi had designed every part of this moment herself, down to the dress she was not wearing and the makeup she had deliberately left undone. She had never once imagined how much it would hurt to watch her own plan succeed exactly as she had built it to. If a story like this is the kind that stays with you after the screen goes dark, do one thing for me before we go any further. Tap that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear is only the surface of what happened to this family. Now let us go back to where all of this truly began, because Tamuno Ekondayo was not the first man to teach Omowunmi Fagbore what happens to a woman the moment the money disappears. Omowunmi was 9 years old the first time she watched someone she loved walk out of a door and never come back the same way. Her father, Babajide Fagbore, ran a small transport and logistics business out of Mushin for 11 years. It was enough to keep the family comfortable. School fees paid on time, rice in the house, a small generator that never failed them during NEPA's long silences. Then 2 of his biggest contracts fell through in the same year. A partner ran off with company funds and everything he had built began to crumble all at once.
Babajide, what are we supposed to do now? Is the police going to arrest your business partner for stealing?
Babajide, what are we supposed to do now? Yesterday asked one night, sitting across from him at a kitchen table crowded with more bills than plates. I am trying, Yesterday. I am trying everything a man can try. Trying does not pay light bill. Trying does not pay Omowunmi's school fees. Babajide said nothing. 2 weeks later, Omowunmi came home from school to find her father's side of the wardrobe empty and her mother sitting alone at that same table, staring at a spot on the wall that wasn't there. Mommy, where is Daddy? Yesterday didn't answer right away. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry, but something behind them had shifted permanently. It is just us now, my daughter.
Wunmi didn't cry that day. She would cry plenty in the weeks that followed, but on that first afternoon, she simply stood in the doorway of her father's empty wardrobe and made herself a promise she wouldn't fully understand until she was a grown woman. Yesterday never once complained in front of her daughter. She took on cleaning work in 3 different offices across Lagos, came home smelling of bleach and exhaustion, and never let Wunmi see her cry. When food was short, Yesterday always ate last and always less, telling Wunmi she had already eaten before you came back so often that Wunmi eventually stopped believing her. Mummy, why didn't you leave too when things became hard? Wunmi asked her once, years later, as a teenager. Yesterday was quiet for a long moment. Because leaving is easy, my daughter. It is staying that is hard. Your father chose the easy road. As the elders say, however far a stream flows, it must never forget where it began. Your father forgot. Wunmi carried that sentence with her for the rest of her life. She started her business at 22 with nothing but a borrowed camera, a laptop with a cracked screen, and a single client, her aunt's 50th birthday party in a rented hall in Surulere. She slept 3 hours a night for the first 2 years, took buses across Lagos with fabric samples balanced on her lap, and once cried in a car park after a client refused to pay her in full, only to wipe her face, walk back inside, and negotiate the payment anyway. As Yesede told her that night, a river that forgets where it began will one day run dry. Never forget how small this business once was, and it will never grow too big for your own 2 hands. She built her career the way her mother had built their survival, one deliberate, exhausting step at a time. By the time she was 28, Omowunmi Fagbore was running one of the most sought-after event planning companies in Lagos, the kind of company old money called when they needed a wedding at Echo Hotel or a naming ceremony that would be talked about for a year. Before Tamuno, there had been others, and each one taught her something she wished she hadn't needed to learn. There was Adebayo, a smooth-talking oil and gas consultant who called her his future wife for 8 months, right up until her company hit a rough quarter and he stopped calling her at home. There was Chukuma, a banker who borrowed small amounts from her 3 separate times, just until my salary clears, he always said, and vanished for weeks whenever Wunmi herself needed anything, even a simple phone call when her father's old business partner tried to reach her out of nowhere asking for money.
I'm cursed. At my age, I will never find a man.
Each time, Wunmi told herself the same thing. At least now I know. At least I found out before it cost me more than money ever could. By the time she turned down her 3rd suitor in 2 years for the same unspoken reason, her mother finally asked her directly, "Wunmi, are you looking for a husband or are you looking for your father's ghost so you can finally win an argument with him?" Wunmi had no answer for that. She only knew that whoever came next would have to prove, without being told he was being tested, that he was nothing like the man who once emptied his side of the wardrobe without a word. By the time Tamuno Ekundayo walked into her life, Wunmi had almost stopped believing such a man existed at all. He was the only son of Ekundayo Properties, a real estate empire his grandfather had built from a single plot in Yabo, and his mother, Morayo, now ran with the precision of a woman who had never once been permitted a public mistake. Wunmi was staffing one of Morayo's charity galas at the Ekundayo mansion in Ikoyi when Tamuno found her backstage, fixing a broken centerpiece with the same calm focus she brought to everything.
You know you're not allowed to be more interesting than the party.
But I must commend that you are very beautiful, and absolutely the only beautiful woman I have ever seen tonight.
"You know you are not allowed to be more interesting than the party," he said. Wunmi didn't look up. The party will survive. This centerpiece may not. He laughed, really laughed, not the rehearsed sound he would later learn he gave to everyone else in that world. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Wunmi let herself believe that maybe this was a different kind of man entirely.
Their courtship moved quietly at first, then all at once. Tamuno didn't only take her to galas. He showed up at her office at 10 in the night with Suya, when she was buried under sitting arrangements. He remembered the names of her staff. He asked about her mother and listened when she answered. 3 months in, Tamuno insisted on visiting Wunmi's mother in Mushin himself, arriving without a driver, without an entourage, carrying a bag of provisions like any ordinary suitor. Yesterday watched him closely all evening, said very little, and only spoke her mind after he left. "He sat down in this small parlor and ate my stew like a man who has eaten worse," said Yesterday, half to herself. That means something. But Wunmi, a man can kneel in the mud once and still be afraid to kneel in it twice. Watch him when the mud does not wash off quickly. Wunmi laughed it off that night. She would remember those words again much later, in a season when the mud did not wash off at all. "What do you want more than anything else in this life?" Tamuno asked her once, lying beside her in the dark. Someone who stays, even when the load becomes hard, Wunmi said. Tamuno went quiet for a moment. You will never have to worry about that with me. She wanted, more than she had wanted almost anything, to believe him. Wunmi became pregnant 8 months into their engagement. Tamuno's reaction in private was pure joy. He wept the first time he heard Ivy's heartbeat at the clinic, held Wunmi's hand through every appointment, already speaking about a nursery with a view of the lagoon. His mother's reaction was a different matter entirely. Morayo Ekundayo had not always been the woman who counted every naira and every alliance with the same cold precision. She had married into the Ekundayo family as a young school teacher from Ibadan, and for the first 5 years of her marriage, Tamuno's late grandmother had never once let her forget that she had married beneath the family's expectations. Morayo had watched that same grandmother nearly succeed in pushing her own husband to set her aside for a woman from a more suitable family, and she had sworn quietly that she would never again be the woman standing outside a mansion gate with nothing to hold on to. She simply never noticed, 30 years later, that she had become the very grandmother she once feared. Morayo had spent those 30 years protecting the Ekundayo name and the Ekundayo balance sheet with equal ferocity, and she did not see Wunmi as a partner for her son. She saw her as an obstacle standing in the way of something larger, the same way she herself had once been seen as an obstacle by another woman in another decade.
You can't marry her!
Tamuno, you understand what is at stake with the Lekki Waterfront project, Morayo said one evening, in a conversation Wunmi wasn't meant to overhear from the hallway. Chief Balogun's financing is the only thing keeping that project breathing, and Chief Balogun has made it very clear he would prefer his daughter's name attached to this family, not some event planners. Mother, Wunmi is carrying my child. I am not blind to that. I am not asking you to abandon her. I am asking you to be wise about timing. A pause. Once the Balogun financing closes, you will have every resource to decide how to handle Wunmi's situation properly. Wunmi stood frozen in the hallway, one hand pressed against her stomach, the elder's old warning rising unbidden in her mind. When the roots of a tree begin to rot beneath the soil, no one notices until the whole tree comes down. Tamuno never said he would leave her. He also never once said he wouldn't. That single unfinished sentence, how to handle Wunmi's situation properly, moved into her chest that night and never fully left it. Ivy was born 4 months later, loud and healthy and perfect. Tamuno was present for the birth, weeping openly, and for a while, Wunmi allowed herself to believe the hallway conversation had simply been Morayo being Morayo, nothing more than a mother's habitual worry. But the sentence never stayed fully silent. Wunmi began noticing things. Tamuno cancelling dinners for family business that always seemed to somehow involve the Balogun family being present. A photograph in a business weekly of Tamuno and Similola Balogun on the groundbreaking of the Lekki project, standing closer than the caption explained. Morayo suddenly warmer to Wunmi in public, the particular warmth people offer someone they have already quietly decided no longer matters. Wunmi did not confront Tamuno. She had learnt at 9 years old that confrontation rarely changes a person's mind. It only gives them time to prepare a better lie. Instead, she decided to learn the truth the only way she still trusted. She would find out what happened when there was nothing left for anyone to gain by staying. It was a dangerous plan. It could end her engagement, her reputation, everything she had spent a decade building with her own 2 hands. But not knowing had already begun to feel heavier than any answer possibly could. She told exactly one person before it began, her childhood friend Adara, now living in Abuja, over a phone call that lasted almost 2 hours. "Omowunmi, listen to yourself," Adara said. "You want to destroy your own name, your own company, to prove a suspicion? I want to know before the wedding, Adara, not after. And if he passes the test?" Omowunmi was quiet for a long moment. "Then I will have wasted his time and mine, and I will apologize to him the rest of my life if that is what it takes. But if he fails it, Adara, I need to know that too, while there is still a door I can walk through." Adara sighed down the phone line. "Just promise me one thing. Whatever you find out, do not let it turn you into a woman who trusts no one at all. That is its own kind of poverty." Omowunmi worked with a friend from university, now a doctor at a private clinic in Victoria Island, to stage a car accident on a quiet road off the Third Mainland Bridge using a rented vehicle, one that left no real injury but produced a completely convincing medical file. A temporary visible loss of mobility that would resolve fully within weeks, though no one besides the two of them would ever know that detail. Omowunmi told Tamuno a version of the truth twisted just enough to be believed. A former client's lawsuit had frozen her company's accounts on top of the accident. As far as anyone could see, she was both broke and unable to walk. Nobody else was told the truth. Not her mother, not her staff, not even Uju, who had been her assistant for 6 years. "Uju, I have to let you go," Omowunmi told her, the day the plan went into motion. "I cannot pay you anymore. I am sorry." Uju's face went completely still. "You are not serious." "I have never been more serious. There is nothing left." Uju had come to Omowunmi 6 years earlier as a 19-year-old from Nnewi who had followed an aunt to Lagos, hoping for a shop attendant's job that never materialized. Omowunmi gave her a plate of food before she even knew her name and hired her the following week to help fold chairs. 2 years later, when Uju's mother needed hip surgery she could never have afforded on her own, Omowunmi paid the full bill without being asked about it and without ever mentioning it again. "You paid for my mother's hip surgery 2 years ago without me asking you twice," Uju said quietly now. "You think I will leave you now because the money has finished? Wunmi, you do not owe me." "I am not doing this because I owe you anything," Uju said, already reaching for the wheelchair handles that had just been delivered. "I am doing it because you are my sister in every way that matters, and a true sister does not leave when the road becomes hard. Now, where do you need to go?" Umi turned her face away so Uju would not see her crying.
My people, how do you think the story ended? Do you think Folarin passed the test just like Uju just did? We are almost at the end, and you are not prepared for the outcome of this story, and where third parties come into play, because this story is not heading where you think it is heading. Come sit with me for a while for what's next. Please like this video. My heart is beating fast as I tell this story. And subscribe so you never miss the next one. Oh, and welcome to the family if you have made it this far. There are other very interesting stories on my channel, tailored just for you. Now let's get back into the story.
Folarin heard about it a very different way. Nobody told him a single thing. He simply noticed that Wunmi's calls to the Ekondayo estate had stopped coming, that Tamuno had mentioned, almost in passing, that things with Wunmi's people had gotten complicated, and Folarin, who had driven for the Ekondayo family for 6 years and known Wunmi far longer than that, went looking for her himself. He and Wunmi had grown up 2 streets apart in the same Mushin neighborhood, back when both their fathers still lived at home. Folarin had watched quietly for most of their adult lives as Wunmi built a life that never once seemed to have room in it for him, not because she didn't care for him, but because she had never once looked at him that way, and he had never once tried to force her to. He found her in a small rented flat off Odrelega, Uju answering the door with Evie balanced on her hip. "I heard something happened," Folarin said quietly. "I am not asking permission. I am simply here." He began carrying market bags 2 flights of stairs twice a week after that. He fixed a leaking tap without being asked. He held Evie so Wumi could sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch, something she hadn't managed since the accident. He never once asked Wumi for anything in return. One evening, watching him rock Evie to sleep in the small sitting room, Wumi asked quietly, "Why are you doing all this, Folarin?" He didn't look up from the baby. "Because you are my friend, and I do not know how to watch a friend go through something like this and do nothing about it. As my grandmother used to say, a single wrist was never made to carry a heavy load alone. I cannot pay you. I did not ask you to." Something in Wumi's chest, tight for weeks, loosened just slightly that night, though she would not have been able to name it yet. The weeks that followed were harder than Wumi had allowed herself to imagine. One night, Evie's temperature climbed until the baby would not stop crying, and Wumi, still supposedly unable to walk, sat helpless in the wheelchair while Uju ran out into the Ojuelega night searching for a walking chemist. It was Folarin who arrived first, having sold his only gold chain, a gift from his late grandfather, to pay for the emergency clinic visit without telling either of them where the money had come from until weeks later. Yesterday visited twice during that season, never once told the truth of the accident, and each time she left, she pressed whatever little money she had managed to save into Wumi's palm. "A mother's hand never grows too old to give," she said, refusing to hear otherwise. And Wumi had to turn away so her mother would not see the guilt in her own face. Guilt for the lie, and guilt for how much it was teaching her. There were nights Wumi almost confessed everything to Tamino during his rare phone calls, the truth rising in her throat like something desperate to be free. Each time, she remembered the sentence from the hallway.
We need to deal with this situation quietly, permanently, before anyone finds out. Millions of naira are on the line, my son. Please, not that girl.
How to handle Wumi's situation properly, and swallowed the truth back down. As the elders warned her mother once, and her mother had passed to her, when the roots of a tree begin to rot beneath the soil, no one notices until the whole tree comes down. She needed to see the whole tree fall, not just hear it creaking.
Tamuno visited exactly once during those weeks, standing awkwardly in the doorway of the small flat, like a man visiting a version of the world he had never expected to see up close. "I am sorry about all of this," he said, not quite meeting his eyes. "I do not know what to say to you." "You do not have to say anything," Wumi answered. He left 10 minutes later. He did not come back. Morayo made certain of that. "Tamuno, I know this is difficult, but you must think clearly. A woman in Wumi's position, with the company gone, with her health uncertain, this is not the partnership this family needs at this moment. Chief Balogun is already asking questions about your commitment to Similoluwa. This has gone on long enough, my son." Tamuno did not argue that evening, but something in him still resisted. "Mother, what if I am wrong about all of this? What if I owe her more than a single awkward visit?" "Owing and marrying are 2 different debts, Tamuno," Morayo answered. "You can settle the first with money quietly later, when things are calmer. The second, if you settle it with the wrong woman, will follow you and this company for the rest of your life. And if Wumi recovers, if the business she says is finished somehow is not?" Morayo's face did not move. "Then you will have lost nothing but a season and gained a stronger position with Chief Balogun in the meantime. This is simply wisdom, my son, not cruelty." Tamuno did not answer her that night. He simply allowed the silence to carry him further from Wumi with every day that passed, the way a man allows a current to take him somewhere he has already privately decided to go, even while telling himself he is only drifting. Meanwhile, Ekundayo Properties itself had quietly begun to feel its own tremors.
2 smaller projects stalled without the Lekki financing behind them, and contractors who once answered Tamuno's calls within the hour started taking 2 days, then 3. Nobody said the word aloud yet, but the company that had once seemed as permanent as the Lagos skyline had begun in small and almost invisible ways to sway. What Tamuno did not know, and what Wunmi could not have guessed either, was that Similoluwa Balogun was not the simple, cold-hearted rival she admired from a distance. Similoluwa had first met Tamuno 2 years earlier, at a groundbreaking ceremony her father dragged her to between semesters in business school in London. She had found him tolerable at best that day, polite, distracted, clearly more interested in the site engineer's blueprint than in her. It was only when the Lekki financing conversations began in earnest and her father started inviting Tamuno to Sunday lunch with increasing frequency that Similoluwa understood what was actually being arranged around her, one calm dinner invitation at a time. In the privacy of her father's Ikoyi residence, the same week the engagement was quietly announced, Similoluwa sat across from Chief Rotimi Balogun. "Papa, I do not love this man." "Love is not the business we are discussing, Similoluwa. This financing keeps 300 jobs alive in this state. You will do your part the same way I have done mine my entire life." Similoluwa said nothing further. As the elders say, the axe may forget what it has done, but the tree never does, and something in Similoluwa quietly began keeping count. The Ekundayo Properties Foundation Gala arrived 3 weeks later, the same event everyone in that world already understood, where Tamuno's engagement to Similoluwa Balogun would be quietly announced to secure the Balogun financing once and for all. Wunmi had not been told any of this directly. She heard it from a mutual acquaintance the very morning of the event, and something in her, some last stubborn hope she had not admitted to herself she was still carrying, pushed her to attend.
Uju wheeled her to the mansion gates. Wunmi held Eve against her chest, dressed simply, nothing like the woman who used to run events exactly like this one from the inside, directing caterers and correcting florists with a single glance. Tamuno and Similoluwa came down the front steps together, Similoluwa in emerald silk, Tamuno's hand already laced through hers.
Please, this is when I need you the most.
"Tamuno, please," Wunmi said, wheeling herself forward. "This is the moment I need you the most. Do not abandon me now." Tamuno stopped for just a second. Something flickered across his face, the ghost of the man who had once wept at his daughter's heartbeat. Then Similoluwa laughed. "Tamuno, we're going to be late." "Thank God I found a woman who knows how to carry herself with dignity," Tamuno said, loud enough for Wunmi to hear every word. "Tamuno, please, she is your daughter. I need you right now, more than I have ever needed anyone." "You should have thought about that before you lost everything." He walked past her without stopping again. The driver held the car door open. Similoluwa did not look back even once. Wunmi sat in the wheelchair outside the mansion she was meant to have married into, her daughter asleep against her chest, and understood, finally and completely, what her mother had meant all those years ago at that crowded kitchen table. Living is easy, staying is what is hard. Behind her, a small crowd of gala guests had gathered at a careful distance, phones lowered but not put away, the way Lagos society always manages to watch without ever quite admitting it is watching. By the following afternoon, the story had already traveled from WhatsApp group to WhatsApp group in the particular way scandal moves through that city, faster than truth and twice as unkind. Some called Tamuno cold. Far more of them, Wunmi would learn later, quietly called her foolish for ever expecting anything else from a family like the Ekundayo. Wunmi wheeled her home in silence. Neither woman spoke a single word the whole way. That night, after Evie was finally asleep, Wunmi sat alone in the dark sitting room. There was a knock at the door. Folarin. "I heard what happened at the gala. I am not here to make you speak about it. I only did not want you to be alone tonight." Wunmi looked at him for a long moment, truly looked the way she had not allowed herself to look at anyone in months. "Why do you keep coming back, Folarin? I have nothing left to give you." Folarin sat down across from her. "Wunmi, I have known you since we were 14 years old. I have watched you build a whole life out of nothing more than once. I am not here because of anything you have. I never was." Something in Wunmi's chest, tight for so many weeks, finally gave way. She thought briefly of her mother's voice at that old kitchen table, of the promise she had made as a 9-year-old girl standing in an empty wardrobe doorway, and understood for the first time that the promise had never truly been about finding a man who would never leave. It had been about learning to recognize one who wouldn't, long before she needed proof. "There is something I need to tell you," she said quietly. "The accident, my legs, it is not what everyone believes it to be." She told him everything. The overheard conversation in Morayo's hallway, the staged accident, the lie about her company, the truth that her legs had already begun healing weeks earlier exactly as the doctor had predicted, and that she had simply never told a soul.
Folarin was quiet for a long time after she finished. "So this whole time," he said, "you have been testing everyone around you?" "Yes." "And me?" Wunmi looked down at her hands. "I never planned to test you, Folarin. You were never supposed to be part of any of this. You kept showing up anyway, without me asking you to." Folarin reached for her hand. "I have loved you since we were teenagers, Wunmi. I never said a word because you were engaged and because I respected that, even when it was hard to watch from the outside. But I am not going anywhere. I never was." Wunmi wept then, for the first time since the gala, not from grief this time, but from something closer to relief. 6 weeks later, the Balogun financing collapsed entirely, not because of anything Wunmi had done, but because Chief Rotimi Balogun's own business affairs turned out to be far shakier than anyone at Ekundayo Properties had realized. Similola, humiliated and furious, ended her engagement to Tamuno the same week. "You should know something before you go around telling this story your own way," Similola told him the last time they ever spoke. "I never wanted this arrangement. I did it for my father, the same way you did it for your mother. So do not stand there and act like a man who lost something precious. We were both being used, Tamuno. The only difference is I always knew it." She confronted her father the same night. "Papa, the deal has collapsed on its own. I am not staying engaged to a man I do not love simply to save your pride in front of your business partners." Chief Balogun, uncharacteristically, did not argue. He sat down heavily in his study chair, looking older than Similola had ever seen him look. "I only wanted to leave you and your brother something solid, Similola. I never once stopped to ask whether what I was building was worth what it was costing you." It was the closest thing to an apology Similola had ever received from him, and she chose quietly to accept it as one. Tamuno was left, for the first time in his adult life, with nothing that anyone else had arranged for him to fall back on. That same week, Morayo sat alone in the mansion's empty dining room, the Balogun deal in ruins, and her son barely speaking to her, and finally allowed herself to remember the young school teacher from Ibadan she had once been, the one who had promised herself she would never let money decide who deserved to be loved in her presence. She had spent 30 years so afraid of becoming that abandoned young bride again that she had built, without ever meaning to, the very kind of household that had once nearly ended her. It was Morayo who eventually learned the fuller truth about Wunmi's accident from a nurse at the private clinic who let something slip in passing conversation. To her credit, Morayo went pale when she understood exactly what her own pressure had truly cost her son. Tamuno arrived at Wunmi's door 2 weeks later, Thinner, quieter, none of the polish he used to wear so easily. "I know what I did," he said. "I know there is no excuse good enough for it. I only need you to know that I am sorry, and if there is any chance at all." Wunmi stood in the doorway on her own 2 feet, Ibie resting on her hip, Folarin visible behind her in the kitchen. Tamuno's eyes moved to Ibie, then to Folarin, and something in his expression finally understood the full shape of what he had lost. Not simply a fiancé, but a family that had quietly assembled itself around someone else while he was busy deciding what he could afford to lose. "Wunmi, I think about that night at the gala every day," his voice breaking slightly. "I keep hearing myself say those words to you. I don't even recognize the man who said them." "That man was always in you, Tamuno. The test did not put him there. It only showed it to me." "Is there truly nothing I can do?" "You made your choice, Tamuno," she said calmly. "You had every opportunity to stay, and you chose to walk past me. Now you must live with what you chose. As the elders say, rain may beat a leopard's skin, but it never once washes out the spots underneath." She closed the door gently. It was the last time she ever spoke to him.
Wunmi and Folarin married the following spring in a small ceremony at Yeside's church in Mushin, with only the people who had actually stayed through the hardest chapters of her life in attendance. Uju, Yeside, a handful of old friends from the old neighborhood. Ivie, walking now, wore a tiny white dress and refused to stop laughing through the entire ceremony. The small church hall in Mushin looked nothing like the Ekundayo mansion's gardens. Plastic chairs instead of imported furniture, jollof rice instead of catered canapes, a borrowed sound system that cut out twice during the vows. And yet, Wunmi would say for years afterward that she had never in her life felt richer than she did that afternoon. Folarin's mother, who had known Wunmi since she was a child, running between their 2 compounds in Mushin, wept openly through the entire ceremony and kept telling anyone who would listen, "I always knew. Even when they were small children, I always knew." Yeside wept through most of it too. "I always told you," she whispered to her daughter afterward. "Staying is the hard part. You have finally found a man who knows how to do it." Uju herself married 2 years later, a quiet mechanic named Chukudi from her own hometown of Newi, in a ceremony Wunmi insisted on paying for in full, not out of obligation this time, but out of the same plain loyalty Uju had once shown her when there was nothing left to gain from staying. "This one is not a debt," Wunmi told her, pressing the envelope into her hands. "This is only what sisters do for each other." A year later, Babajide, Wunmi's father, reached out for the first time in over a decade, having heard through relatives that his daughter was doing well. Wunmi and her mother discussed it together, the same way they had made every difficult decision in that family for 20 years, side by side, without illusions about what forgiveness could and could not repair. "We forgive you," Wunmi told him when they finally spoke on the phone, "but forgiveness does not mean things return to how they once were. Please respect that boundary." Babajide accepted it quietly, the way people do when they finally understand that a door has closed for reasons that were entirely fair. Looking back over everything that happened, one question remains standing at the center of it all, the same question that sits at the heart of every story like this one. What happens the moment the comfort disappears? Who stays beside you, and who was only ever present for what you could give them? Wunmi had set out to test one man's loyalty, but what she discovered instead was that the people worth keeping had been standing quietly behind her the entire time, not because they were being tested, but simply because that is who they had always been, test or no test at all. So remember this wherever you are listening from tonight. Hardship does not create a person's character. It only reveals what was already there. The ones who vanish the moment life becomes difficult were never truly staying for you in the first place. And the ones who show up with nothing at all to gain, who carry your market bags up 3 flights of stairs and rock your child to sleep without once asking what is in it for them, those are the ones worth building an entire life around. As our people have always said, the hand that gives may look no different from the hand that takes, but it is only time and only hardship that ever truly tells you which is which. And as the elders also remind us, a child who is always carried on someone's back never learned to know how far home truly is. Sometimes we must be set down, even painfully, before we can measure the real distance between the people who love us and the people who are only ever passing through. Wunmi's mother often says now that the whole family survived on one lesson passed down like an inheritance, that money can build a house, but it has never once built a home on its own. Morayo, in her own way, learned the same lesson 30 years too late to spare herself the cost of it, and spent her remaining years trying to earn back a closeness with her son that money had never once been able to purchase for her. If this story reached something in you tonight, let me know in the comments which character you understood the most: Wunmi, Folarin, Similoluwa, or even Morayo. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next one.